Welcome to Silberman Law Firm's weekly docket, where we talk legal news and practical law. Today is February 16th, 2024. I'm your host, Phil Silberman. I'm joined by my co-host, Austin Black. How are you doing today, Austin?
Doing fine. How about yourself?
Well, ready for episode 5. Very exciting stuff. What's on our docket today, Austin?
We're first going through our legal news segment where we're talking about Snoop Dogg and Master P suing Walmart because their cereal isn't selling. And then we have a guest interview with Carson Joachim.
Just like Dwight.
Okay, great. Carson Joachim, who is a criminal attorney in Houston, talking about open container laws, flying drones over prisons to deliver drugs, and then what exactly possession of various regulated substances can be. We're going to answer some legal questions, such as how to add your spouse to a deed. And then we'll do a little bit of ranting and raving about how much money government bureaucrats make.
So what I like most about that introductory outline is it's the first time ever in media history where Snoop Dogg, Master P, and Dwight Yoakam have ever been mentioned in the same sentence.
I wouldn't know.
I'm sure you're an avid fan of all three of those artists.
All three, absolutely.
Let's get started with our legal news. So we've got Snoop Dogg and Master P have sued Post Foods and Walmart for sabotaging the cereal sales of Snoop and Master P. So Snoop Dogg, Master P, they decided it'd be a good idea to sell cereal for kids. It doesn't sell. They sue Walmart. Here's the question that all of our listeners want to know often. I know you know who Snoop Dogg is. Do you know who Master P is?
So I know how Master P raps because he's been referenced in some songs that I've heard in this particular rapping style. But no, aside from that, I don't really have much of a pin on that.
I'm going to enlighten you. Master P is a rapper, was popular in the late 90s. One of his most popular songs is called Ice Cream. And the whole song is about a very powerful metaphor of the ice cream man being a drug dealer, a local neighborhood, going around the neighborhood and selling ice cream, which is a metaphor for drugs. This man now wants to sell children's cereal with Snoop Dogg.
That sounds like a great idea. I don't know why Walmart would want that to fall apart.
Have you ever had the cereal?
I have not eaten cereal, like probably 3-4 years, something like that.
That's a good thing because as a public service, I will mention that eating cereal is basically like eating a ton of sugar and dessert. If you ever go to try to find sugar-free cereal, I challenge anybody listening to this, go to your local grocery store, try to find sugar-free cereal. It may be an impossibility.
Absolutely. I did look up the branding, though. Yes, there are dogs all over the right. Boxes, etc. Like animated dogs that look like they could be in a Disney kids show or something like that.
So I have a theory on this. They sue Walmart. They say, you're not selling our cereal. You didn't put it on the shelves, and that's why it's not selling, and you sabotaged us. But after you and I both looked at the photos, it's a cartoon dog standing over a bowl of cereal. I'm thinking the stalker got confused and put the cereal on the pet food aisle.
Maybe.
The causes of action that they filed against Walmart for not putting their cereal on the shelves are, and we've got a list here, breach of contract, breach of fiduciary duty, negligent misrepresentation, fraud, and conspiracy.
Okay.
Now, for those people who don't know the grocery business, and I don't know a lot about the grocery business, but I know this, the shelf space is precious. You better have a good product because they don't have a heck of a lot of shelf space, and it is precious space. So Master P and Snoop, they think that their cereal was deserving of the space. And they're alleging that it should have been put out there. Now let's go through our causes of action. The first cause of action, breach of contract. Did Walmart have an express agreement that they were going to give the cereal shelf space? Maybe they didn't. If it's express agreement, maybe they've got a good
because to be clear, there's one example cited in the lawsuit, right? That there were over 200 boxes of the cereal just sitting in a Walmart in New Berlin, Wisconsin for months and not placed on the aisle.
Yes. So in the contract, if it says you've got to put our cereal out there, maybe that is a breach. Now, the next one I'm not so sure about, breach of fiduciary duty.
Yeah. I don't know about that one.
You're a lawyer. I'm a lawyer. In Texas and really all over the country, we owe our clients a fiduciary duty.
Correct.
Lawyers have that kind of. If you're an agent in a power of attorney, there's a fiduciary duty. The agent owes the principal in the power of attorney a fiduciary duty. If you're a realtor and you're selling a house or you're representing a buyer, then you likely have a fiduciary duty. And that means you can't put your interest above the interest of your client.
If you provide professional services to someone, many times there is a fiduciary duty created. It's difficult to create one outside of that context.
That's exactly right. We are not sprinkling fiduciary duty all around our economy. This is a special relationship. And I don't think that Walmart or grocery stores owe their vendors.
Do they have a carte blanche fiduciary duty to all of the cereal producers that they contract with? Probably not.
No. Now, the next one we've got is negligent misrepresentation. And this is an interesting one.
It is interesting, right? Because the elements of negligent misrepresentation are that, one, you have to make a false statement, recklessly. And that has to be said within the course of normal business. This false information has to guide other people, and the defendant had to fail to exercise reasonable care in gathering or disseminating their false information. And then, of course, the last element of any tort, damages.
I guess that's possible in this context. Maybe maybe Walmart led them to believe we're going to put your stuff on the shelf. And Well, I think this lawsuit is a long shot for Snoop and Master P. I tend to think the cereal's not selling because it's not a good product, but no one ever.
Or it's on the dog food aisle, right?
Yes, that was my primary theory.
My opinion is that Walmart probably should just drop it like it's hot and get out of the lawsuit while they can.
That's a good one. I've got a guest this week by the name of Carson Joachim, attorney at law. Carson is a criminal attorney, which is always the most interesting kind. Welcome to the show, Carson.
Thank you, Phil.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Appreciate the opportunity to be on here.
We're excited to have you. We're going to be talking about some different topics today. We're going to let the listeners get to know you and how you got into criminal law. We've got 3 topics we're going to be going over. Pretty interesting stuff. We're going to be talking about open containers, constructive possession of controlled substances or bad things, could be possession of a minor in alcohol possession, the concept of possession in criminal law. And then finally, there's a relatively recent law. We're going to talk about drones and flying drones with contraband into prisons. But before we do any of that, tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into criminal law.
I've been practicing for about 22 years. I'm born and raised in Houston, Texas. Went and decided to play college football on a scholarship to play at Eastern New Mexico University. I was a receiver there. It was a lot of fun, and then decided to go to law school. Went to Baylor University and graduated law school and got the opportunity to start as an assistant district attorney under Chuck Rosenthal for the Harris County District Attorney's Office. And it was just very exciting. This area of law really lends itself to being in a courtroom almost on a daily basis. And that was the reason I went to law school, is to be in the courtroom representing clients.
Well, let's talk about that for a second, because in our firm, we don't practice criminal law. So it's great to have you on the show. Here's what we civil lawyers think about criminal lawyers. First of all, you guys always have the best suits. And then we think of the criminal courthouse being a little dangerous and a little dirty. My experience going over to the criminal courthouse one time, and I was doing some pro bono work, and I go in there, it smelled.
Yeah.
And then I get into the courtroom, and I got a little anxious because you walk up and there's guys in shackles and they've got the jumpsuits on. And you very quickly realize we're in a different place. Then I sat down and I noticed that in some of the jury boxes, they actually had shackles to chain them.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's definitely an adjustment for folks that don't do it on a daily basis. Now, we are in a new courthouse. The old courthouse that I think you're referencing did have kind of a dingy smell about it.
It no longer smells. With the taxpayers have upgraded the courthouse.
But to your point, you get desensitized to it. They do bring folks that are in custody out in shackles and jumpsuits, and you're walking amongst them daily in the courtroom. In my 22 years of practice, I've often described criminal law versus civil law to my non-lawyer friends. And I tell them that criminal law, when you're dealing with life and liberty, you have generally irrational people. And I can tell you, I have had a physical altercation at a courthouse twice.
This is important, okay?
Yeah.
Because what has made news recently and which has been all over social media is that guy who jumped across the courtroom like Superman and assaulted the judge. So that does not happen very often.
No, it doesn't happen. We've had instances where they've thrown things at the judge, but that happens few and far between. The way that our courthouse or the way that our courtrooms are constructed, there's quite a bit of distance between the accused and the judge. And the sheriff's department does a really good job of training there.
You're doing good work over there. Let's get into some of our substantive topics. And the first thing we're talking about is alcohol possession in a motor vehicle. And I'm going to set the stage. I don't drink, but I may be married to a woman who enjoys a margarita every now and then. And we go to this place down the street. It's like a pickup Mexican fajita thing. My wife wants a margarita. And they just hand it to me. It's just a styrofoam cup with a top on it. Me being the ultimate paranoid lawyer, I get in the car and I'm like, wait a minute. What's the open container law? Am I violating anything here?
Right.
So what's going on that? Do they just give me a styrofoam cup and it's okay?
So it's a recent phenomenon, right? Used to, as we all know in Texas, you can only consume it at the restaurant, or you could purchase it at a liquor store Monday through Saturday to deliver to the house. But in the Texas Penal Code under section 49.031, possession of alcoholic beverage in a motor vehicle. And it describes an open container as a bottle, a can, or receptacle that contains any amount of alcoholic beverage and that is open and that has been opened or has a broken seal or the contents of which are partially removed. And we still are unable to transport open containers, which means bottle tops open, cans popped open at the restaurants if they do order a margarita to go, that they'll put it in their proprietary styrofoam cup. And then they put this either some kind of masking tape over it or some kind of TABC tape. And once they hand it to the individual, their hands are clean at that point. Then that person can lawfully transport it from the restaurant to the ultimate point of consumption.
What I'm hearing is my local Mexican restaurant is doing this wrong if they forget to put tape on it.
Yeah.
Okay, but I don't like taking chances. So if next time I go pick up the fajitas and the margarita for my wife, I'm bringing my own tape and I'm taping that sucker up.
I think belt and suspenders, as an old lawyer always told me, never be too cautious, right? But I will tell the listeners, there is a carve-out provision in section 49.031 that if you're a passenger in the passenger area of a motor vehicle designated, maintained, or used primarily for the transportation of persons for compensation, including a bus, a taxi cab, a limousine, or perhaps an Uber, then it's not necessarily a violation of this provision.
That's important, because we've got a lot of gig workers that drive around, listen to the show, Uber drivers, Lyft drivers. You're picking up drunk people all over the state. If they get in your car and they've got open containers, you're okay, is what I'm hearing.
Yes, sir.
In the old days, and I grew up, my dad owned a salvage yard in Hempstead, Texas. Mm-hmm. And this was back early 90s, late 80s. Mm-hmm. My dad would crack open a beer on the way home. We didn't have an open container law in Texas until after that. And in fact, the joke in Texas was many of our accidents were preceded by the statement, watch this, hold my beer.
Yeah.
That's the reputation Texas had. And we've cleaned up our act as far as modernizing our beverage criminal penal section.
Yeah.
The only state that was behind us, I think, was Louisiana. And Louisiana probably still has some of the most liberal alcoholic laws in the country, I would guess.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
So you remember our parents, if you lived on those towns bordering Louisiana, they used to always cross the border in Louisiana to buy alcohol because you could purchase it at 18.
That's right. Louisiana only raised the drinking age to 21 because the federal government wasn't going to give them money for the highways unless they raised the age. So our next topic is possession. In criminal law, we have a lot of possession stuff come up. And I'll give you an example. The criminal law judge is lamenting, if we can just find the guy who is taking all of these drugs and hiding them in people's cars and houses, we will solve all the criminal law problems in Harris County. Joke being, many of these people were guilty of the crime, but that was the defense. Judge, those aren't my drugs.
Yeah.
So talk to us a little bit about possession and what that means in criminal law.
It's construed rather liberally, and I think that law enforcement probably appreciates that because it gives them a lot of probable cause or reasonable suspicion to further investigations. The Texas Health and Safety Code says that the legal definition of possession is the actual care, custody, control, and or management of a particular item. And in this scenario, it would be a controlled substance. And it doesn't have to be ownership. Possession's not ownership. For the purposes of our argument, if you and I are driving around and you purchase some marijuana, you stick it in the cup holder, and we're just sitting here cruising down the road, and you get caught for speeding, and the officer looks in there and sees it or smells it, technically you and I both could be arrested for possession of marijuana.
That's one of my biggest fears because I have teenagers.
Yep.
And I'm driving my teenagers around and I pick up some of their friends and the teenagers bring marijuana and leave it in the back of the car. Or we get pulled over and the cop finds the marijuana on the floorboard. Are you telling me it's pretty typical that we all get charged?
Once again, that's a fact-intensive inquiry. You have to look at it and articulate where was it? Would a reasonable person have even known it was there? Whose car is it? Who has the greater right of access or generally the greater right of access to this car?
That's an excellent point. I'm going to go out on a limb. I think this is my not knowing about criminal law, but prosecutors are people and they know that in criminal law, they have to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. And if I'm driving around and I'm a middle-aged man and I've got 3 or 4 kids in my car that are teenagers, my defense is those really weren't my drugs. I'm going to guess that's going to be a hard case for a prosecutor to prove. But if you look at circumstantially, if you're 5 20-year-old guys and you're driving around a car and you're blaring rap music or whatever, and your defense is those aren't my drugs, I'm going to guess that's a harder thing to prove in that situation. Would you agree with that?
There's a lot of articulable facts that need to be discussed in each particular situation. And obviously, the age of the individuals in the car, does it smell? Sometimes if the car smells like marijuana and then they see marijuana, then it's going to be exceptionally difficult to say, I didn't know that was in there. And they're like, no, these are his kids. He should have known that was in there. Phil, I feel comfortable telling them we're going to try this case to a jury. Very comfortable that some objectively qualified, reasonable jurors would not find that you knew or you possessed those drugs beyond a reasonable doubt. I think we have a high chance of success.
If that happens to me, we're taking that to a jury. I feel good about that one.
It comes up weekly. It could be drugs, it could be alcohol, it could be firearms, a whole list of various items that the possession argument comes in. But
all right, so we're moving on. This is our final topic. We're talking about drones being used to fly contraband like drugs into prisons. But before we talk about it specifically, I imagine a prison like Shawshank Redemption, and you've got a prison yard, and they get like 20 or 30 minutes in the prison yard. And Andy Dufresne's walking around the yard, and he's dropping his little pebbles or his stones because he's digging out of the prison inch by inch. There's the guard towers out there. Is that what it looks like for?
Yeah, they have a very similar structure to them. I think that I'm not particularly sure which prison they used in Shawshank Redemption, but it had much more of a castle kind of fortification look to it. And I know if any of our listeners that are in the Houston and surrounding areas ever drive up 45 on their way to Dallas, you drive through Huntsville and you can see the Holiday Unit. It's definitely not out of the realm of possibility. You can get a drone flying over these things. And as we all know, the sophistication of these things has grown exponentially over the past probably 5, 6, 7 years. And they're very clandestine. Some of them make no noise. I mean, I did find an article. It looks like it's from October of 2022, but it says a Smithville man pleaded guilty to flying a drone loaded with drugs and other contraband into a prison. He pled guilty to it. I think ultimately what sunk him, he was flying this thing over and dropping it into the main yard and they would pick it up, is that the drone crashed, landed in the prison proper. They were able to link it to him. But yeah, this is a new and novel concept that's coming up. And the way these prisons are structured, it's definitely plausible.
Okay, so the guard who's in the tower with the rifle, that may just be the movies, because I guess, I don't know if the prisoner tries to climb the wall, the guard just shoots him. That could just be the movies.
They have firearms up on those towers. They do. Yep.
Okay, so those guys are asleep on the job because they're missing the drone coming into the prison.
I don't know what this drone was like. I don't know if it made that buzzing noise that we're used to hearing. I have no idea what time of day. The way the article reads, it sounds like he had made several drops into the prison. And the folks are just very creative.
I don't blame the prison guards for that, though. That's hard to catch. I'm going to get off this topic.
You have to be a crackjack shot, I think, to hit a moving drone. But that's just
but if he should call somebody. He's up in the tower. I think these guys are asleep. Okay, because you can't fly. If I'm in the tower and I'm diligent, I'm going to see the drone. I'm going to see the drone. But let's get off. I'm not trying to beat the guys up to. I'm just putting that out there. I think someone needs to really check these guards. That's what I'm saying.
Well, don't disagree.
Let's talk about the law. What actually does this new law say about the drones, and what kind? Is it a felony? Is it a misdemeanor? What are we talking about? Yeah.
So, quoting the statute again in the Texas Penal Code, it's under section 38.115, titled Operation of Unmanned Aircraft over Correctional Facility or Detention Facility. And just operating it over the prison grounds is a Class B misdemeanor, but it's a state jail felony if during the commission of the offense, the actor used the unmanned aircraft to provide contraband to a prison.
I think it should be a state jail felony if you drop some drugs in a prison. How many years do you get for a state jail felony?
For our first level of felonies, which is the state jail felony, which carries any range of punishment from 6 months in the state jail to 2 years in the state jail and or up to a $10,000 fine.
So the guy who's flying the drone in, he's getting 2 years max, is what I heard, state jail felony. Is that right?
If he was sentenced or pled to the maximum, his max would be 2 years in the state jail. That would be his maximum.
You mentioned the Harris County Jail and how people can go serve time in the Harris County Jail, but there's a lot going on in the public. How dangerous is that place, right? Are people just getting beat up and killed? We're hearing it's like the most dangerous jail in the country.
It's a jail. And so it's not going to be the quality of living that most people would like. I wouldn't want to spend 5 minutes in jail, much less days and weeks and months and years. But I would say that they're, for the most part, doing a good job of housing these folks and keeping them in reasonably comfortable conditions. The state and the federal governments, they constantly come in and monitor these jails to make sure their numbers are correct. They get 3 squares a day, but once again, it's not supposed to be a place that people want to hang out in.
But here's what I want to know. Do you think I would survive for 3 days?
Yes, you would survive, but it would be a very uncomfortable stay. So
would I have to join a gang?
Not for a 3-day stay in the Harris County Jail. No, Well, knowing you, they'd probably have you drafting some sort of legislation for the jail before you got out of there. I think you're safe.
All right, that closes us up. That brings us to an end for the topics we wanted to discuss today. I certainly appreciate you coming on the show and you sharing your knowledge of criminal law. If people out there listening to this, if they've got questions about criminal law and they want to get a hold of you, what's the best way to reach?
They can email me directly. It's my first name, last name at Yahoo is the one that I use. I have a very unusual name. So it's Carson as in Nancy, Joachim as in Mary at yahoo.com. And if you email me and it's something that we want to discuss, I will give you my personal cell phone number in response to the email, and you can text me directly and we can speak on the phone. I don't mind doing that because folks are always in particular situations or have questions about friends or family, and I'm always there to answer that for them.
If you've got questions for Carson, go ahead and email him at that email address about criminal law or anything he discussed on the show today. He's happy to do that for you. We certainly appreciate him coming on the show. Let's answer some legal questions.
Okay, we have people come to us who want to add a spouse to a deed where the property that they're trying to convey ownership in was separate property prior to the marriage.
The call we typically take at the firm is one spouse owns the property prior to marriage, gets married, and the other spouse says, you don't really love me unless you put me on the deed.
Yeah.
We're changing the character of property. It was separate property because that house was bought prior to marriage. It's still separate property after marriage. To change the character of the property, we have to get both spouses to sign a community property deed, and then we record it in the real property record, and then it's done, and now both spouses own it as community property. Now, sometimes they call in and they want to do the opposite.
Yes.
They want to convert community property to separate property, which is much more difficult.
Correct.
Most people calling in wanting to do this, they're wanting to do this for asset protection. Usually one of the spouses are high risk. I usually use the example of doctors or home builders or even lawyers, professionals or people that are in types of businesses that are likely to get sued.
People who have fiduciary duties.
Yes, people that have fiduciary duties. And if they get sued for breach of fiduciary duty or some type of malpractice, then you want to protect those assets from creditors. So one of the best ways to do that, if you trust and love your spouse, is to give your spouse all of the assets. And you can do that by typically a partition
and exchange agreement. Yeah, exactly. Which some people also call postnuptial.
Yeah. We do that quite a lot. The other way to do that is a gift deed that presumes the property is going to be converted to separate property, but not quite as good because it's just a presumption as opposed to tracking the code and creating a postnuptial partition and exchange agreement.
So, exactly. Because presumptions can be rebutted.
Yes. And one other note on this issue, sometimes spouses want to change the character of homestead property for asset protection. That's generally not required because in Texas, we have some of the strongest homestead protections in the state. So the homestead will almost never be subject to a forced sale or foreclosure. So there's really no need to change the homestead property around for purposes of asset protection. There may be other reasons to change it. What are we ranting and raving about? Oh, this is this one. I've been mad about this one for a while.
Okay. We're ranting and raving about how much local officials in the government can make.
Right. So there was a story that came out, I think it was a couple of weeks ago. Harris County toll road executive gets a paying.
Okay.
Now, the Harris County toll road is exactly what it sounds like. You pay money, you ride on the road. But it's mostly, I would say it's mostly, we've got the Hardy toll road,
Sure.
We have West Park toll road, we have, but I'd say it's mostly the Sam Houston tollway. And, basically a bunch of people driving around in circles. You go all around and they use it to get to places. So the guy who manages this, the executive director, his name is Robert Trevino. I want you to guess it. What do you think the guy who oversees all the toll roads in Houston, Harris County area, what do you think he should get paid?
What do I think he should get paid?
Yeah, what do you think you'd have to pay? If Austin Black were going to go out and put the job on Indeed and interview for this position to get a competent person to manage the toll roads in Harris County, what would you put the salary at?
I'll say 150.
Okay. I agree with you. I think that's plenty of money. This guy, Robert Trevino, was making $350,000 a year. They gave him a 39% raise so that his total pay for managing people driving around in circles, that's being inflammatory there. His total pay is $485,000.
Okay. The presidential salary in 2023 was $400,000 a year.
Okay.
So this guy is making more money than the president for being the Harris County Toll Road Executive Director.
Robert Trevino makes more money than the president of the United States in Harris County. The county judge, which is her main job, is to not really preside over law or trials, is to make executive decisions and run the county. When there's a hurricane, you see her on the television making executive decisions. There's a commissioner's court, and there's 5 members of that court, and her name is Lena Hidalgo. I'm not a Lena Hidalgo, okay? But there was a vote to raise Robert Trevino's salary, raise this guy's salary, the executive director of the Harris County Toll Road. And she was the only one of the 5 that voted no. Now, she's not the most articulate woman in the world. And this is quote, her quote was, "This feels insanely icky."
I agree.
Miss
I don't know. I don't think you need to be more articulate than that.
Miss Hidalgo, well-spoken.
I'm going to cite that in my next summary judgment response. This feels insanely icky.
Now, here's the people that voted to give Robert Trevino the raise. Rodney Ellis voted yes. This man needs to make $485,000 a year. Adrian Garcia voted yes. Tom Ramsey voted yes. Leslie Briones voted yes. Shame on all of you. And people need to know that you voted to pay this man $485,000. This is a great example of why people are tired of these government bureaucrats.
Phil, do you think if we went to grab a random Delaware judge to approve the financial package of the Harris County Toll Road Director, do you think that Delaware judge would have approved this package?
That is an excellent point. Our listeners that are in tune with what's going on in Delaware, that understand the state declined to approve Elon Musk's pay package for Tesla, billions of dollars. Austin has come up with an amazing idea. I am not usually a proponent of shipping our legislation up to the East Coast, but this needs to go up to Delaware. If there's some way to get this thing in Delaware, we're getting it there.
Sounds good.
I've owned many businesses. I own the law firm. I own other businesses currently. I hire a lot of people. And I think anybody that makes $485,000 a year, they need to be in private industry. They need to add value. There's no competition. It's not like there's another toll road option, right? Where competitors are coming in and you've got to compete for drivers.
Yeah.
There's nothing complex about this. The job description, in my mind, if we put this on Indeed, would be sit in your office, drink coffee, make sure the people can drive around in circles, have the tow trucks come in and tow the cars off the roads, keep the roads maintained. I can go out right now and hire a top-notch person to do that job for $200,000 a year right now. And the allegations were the commissioners said, oh, he received an offer from the city of Houston, which is basically teetering on bankruptcy all the time or insolvency. Received the offer from the city of Houston that he was going to be poached by the good riddance at $485,000 a year.
Absolutely.
That's right. I mean, you can't screw this up.
No.
I just cannot screw this up. And we want to pay this guy $485,000 a year.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say, Robert Trevino, shame on you as well, because there are school teachers and firefighters and nurses that are getting up in Harris County at 5 a.m. to go drive and do these jobs that we really need done, and paying tolls between $1 and $3 in a toll road.
Yep. Hardworking people
that are living paycheck to paycheck, getting by, so you can make $485,000 a year. Mr. Trevino, you, sir, are despicable and are a disgrace. That's the end of our show. My blood pressure is all worked up. After that,
I can tell.
This has also been like a therapy session.
Good.
With that said, that's the end of our show. My name is Phil Silberman. I've been your host. Austin Black has been my co-host. Please rate us. Please review us. Drop us a comment. Subscribe, listen, follow us, whatever you do, wherever you get your podcast. We appreciate you listening.
Yep. Thank you.